Hey there, James here with Penner Trailer Sales, and today I want to talk about axle identification. So here at Penner Trailer Sales, it's not uncommon for someone to call us looking for parts for their axle. Maybe it's hubs, bearings, brakes, a couple other things it may be, and we'll ask them, well, what size axle, what type of axle do you have? And the answer we get is, I'm not sure, which naturally then we're not sure if we have the parts for them either. So we need to know what size axle, and it's actually usually not that hard to tell with just a little bit of knowledge. And oftentimes if someone were to snap a picture of it and text it to us, we can oftentimes go from there. So I'll give a quick rundown over kind of how to tell what size axle you may have. So first of all, one of the very common ones is a 5-lug 3,500 pound axle. You'll find that very commonly on single axle utility trailers, on car haulers. If it's a tandem axle, they'll call it a 7K trailer. That's 3,500 and 3,500. So they're using that 3,500 pound axle, and they're always 5 lugs. It's the only axle that uses 5 lugs. So if you have a 5-lug axle, it's probably a 3,500 pounder. There are axles that are rated below 3,500 pounds, and it gets a little murky below because there can be odd variations and so on. If it's below that, it's a little less common, and we oftentimes need more information to be able to know exactly what parts you may need. But most commonly, 3,500 pounds and up is the axles, the parts that we'll be dealing with. Next up from a 3,500 pound axle is a 5,200 pound axle. That's going to have a 6-lug hub. The 5,200 pound also can be figured as a 6,000 pound axle. They're very similar. They're both a 6-lug hub. And the only variation, if I'm not mistaken, is the outer bearing. That's the only difference between a 5,200 pound and a 6,000 pound. And of those two, 5,200 pound is most common. The next step up is a 7K axle, a 7,000 pound axle. That's going to have an 8-lug hub. They're very common on equipment trailers, dump trailers, and so on. 7K axle is going to have 8-lug. Usually, it'll either have a 1/2 inch or 9/16 studs. It's going to have a 16-inch wheel on it as well. The next step up from that is the 8,000 pound axle. That also has 8 lugs, but that's going to have a 5/8 stud, generally speaking. And oftentimes 8,000 pound axles are equipped with 17.5 inch wheels. So again, just some markers and some indicators to know what you have. Going on from there, there's 9,000 pound axles and 10,000 pound axles. They're usually pretty similar, and actually 12,000 pound axles. Back in the day, there used to be a 10,000 pound general duty and a 10,000 pound heavy duty. Today, it seems like they've now changed the terminology. Instead of a 10,000 pound heavy duty, they call that a 12,000 pound. And again, 10,000 pound and 12,000 pound, or 10K HD if you have a little heavier trailer. They're very similar. If again, if I'm not mistaken, the outer bearing is the only difference. Visually on the outside, you can't tell the difference between them. They'll have the same bolt pattern, the same wheels bolted on them, and so on. Above 12K, there's a 15 and 16K axle. Again, they're pretty much just the same axle, and those are going to have a much larger hub. It's still 8 bolts, but it's nothing like the rest of them. It's a really large 22 millimeter stud on those. And if you have those, you're probably going to know it. So that's some ways to check, just a quick visual check to identify what size axle you have. Another way to check is check your VIN sticker. If your VIN sticker on your trailer is still legible, that will have the gross axle weight rating, GAWR, and that'll say 10, 12, 35. It'll say the weight capacity of the axle, so that's a pretty good indicator. Unless, again, if you're down on that 3,500 pound side, it may say 3,000 pounds and actually be a 3,500. But a quick conversation over the phone, we should be able to sort that out. Now, that will tell you, or that'll tell us and you what axle you have, so we can quote you or get you parts that you need. But sometimes you need a new axle, and you need to order an axle. And there's a couple of, not many, there's 2 main points, well, maybe 3 main points that we need to know, and actually probably more than 3 actually. We need to know if it's going to be an idler axle or a brake axle. I have this axle here kind of as an example. This is an idler axle. You can tell it's an idler axle because this hub has no brake drum. And so if we ask you if it's an idler or a brake axle, just look through your wheel, the holes in the wheel, and see if there's a drum or brake disc in some cases behind. But if it just looks like this and there's nothing else back there, it's an idler axle. This little bracket here, this is what a brake assembly would mount to. Pretty much all axles, idler or brake axle, will have the brake mounting flange. Few times you'll see an axle won't have that, but generally they always will. You could convert this axle to a brake axle if you wanted to by changing this idler hub to a brake drum hub, there we go, and adding the brake assembly here. So we'll need to know that if we're ordering you an axle. Of course, we need to know the weight capacity, and we can tell from this is a 5 lug, so this is a 3,500 pound axle. Then we're going to the key measurements are the hub face measurement. And so the hub face is literally this face right here that the wheel bolts to. It's not the outside of the wheel, it's not the outside or the inside of the tire, it's this face right here. You really need to wheel off to accurately measure that. You can take some educated guesses, and actually if you're not able to take your wheel off and you can just tell us the measurement to the brake flange, we can usually calculate that, but it's best to get the measurement from hub face to hub face on the other end. And that's abbreviated to the HF, hub face measurement. Then we also need spring center, and that can be a little confusing as well because it's spring center. So you don't actually hook, it's not outside to outside, hook on the outside here, measure on the outside over there. You need to center line to center line. An easy way to check that is to hook to the outside here and just measure to the inside of the other spring, and that'll tell you your spring center. So we need to know the SC, the spring center measurement, and the HF, the hub face measurement. After that, we may ask you if it has a camber or not. That's sometimes an issue, sometimes not. It might be a drop axle, a couple other details that we'll ask you if we're wanting to order an axle, but the measurements are really key. Every axle, when it's manufactured, will have an axle label. Today they're a sticker. Back in the old days, they used to be a metal plate that was stamped that had the pertinent information on it. Today, for quite a few years now, they just use a sticker. They try to put it on the back side of the axle tube so that it's not exposed to road debris and rocks and so on. And they actually do generally stay legible for quite some time. But all the pertinent information is here. And if it's legible, if you can get a snapshot of this and send it to us, or just get the numbers off of it, we'll be able to order an axle. This axle here is an 8974. It's not, sometimes they'll be labeled as HF and SC measurements. This one isn't, but kind of knowing axles, I can see that this is an 8974, so it has an 89 hub face and a 74-inch spring center. The capacity is here, it's a 3,500 pound. This is manufactured by Lippert, so it has a serial number. If I only have that serial number, I can call Lippert. I can give them that serial number, they can tell me everything about it. Dexter is pretty much the same way as well. So if we can get that sticker, that's the most accurate way. Also have the date of manufacturer and so on. So hopefully that's helpful. Sometimes axles can feel mysterious if you're trying to get one ordered or trying to get parts for one. And hopefully this will give you some pointers and some clues in identifying what axle you have, what parts you need, and what replacement axle you may need. If you have any axle questions or need parts or replacement, we'd love to help you out. Give us a call here at Penner Trailer Sales at 931-361-1122.